Photoshop. Project 7, House Painting. We are on Stage 4, Drawing Nature. We've got a pretty good looking house, but we're missing a few things. We are missing the grass, the shrubs, and the trees. Photoshop makes it very easy to add these items, especially the trees. I love the tree thing. The trees are great. We're going to turn off absolutely everything except for the sketch layer. And you're going to add a new layer. You want that at the top of the stack and name it Tree 1. On that layer, with your marquee tool, create a selection that picks up an area surrounding the tree. We are going to use that to define the size of the tree that we want to create. And we're going to go to Filter, Render, Tree. Photoshop gives us some wonderful presets in here, and there's a big drop-down list of different types of trees that we could select, just depending on the look that you want to create. We want a rather tall tree that's going to be well formed. This one would probably work well. The tree that they use is number 10. It's a type of poplar. That would be fine too. I'm going to go with what they're using. If you really see something that you would like to do differently, go for it. What you do want to set is your light. Now the light is on our image. Remember, our shadows are falling towards our left, so your light direction is going to come either all the way from the left side of the tree or the right side of the tree, and we want our light coming from somewhere on the right side. You can select how many leaves you want on your tree. Do you want a lot of leaves? Do you want a few leaves? Your leaf size, you can go with a very small amount of leaves. If you go all the way over to the end to 0, it's going to look like a winter tree. We want something that's going to look more like the middle of summer, so let's haul this over and get a bunch of leaves on the tree, but not too awful many. You can control how far down your tree your branches start. So we probably want something that's up a little bit. And do you want a real thick tree or very tiny? Okay, so set everything where you think everything looks good. Say OK. It's going to render a tree that is approximately the same size. Go ahead and deselect, and then we are going to pick up the Move tool, and if you do not have your transform controls showing, you can go to Edit and choose Free Transform. Stretch your tree to make it fit a little bit better, and you want to make sure that you're covering the area where the trunk is supposed to be. And when you're satisfied with that, hit Enter to accept it. Make a new layer and call that Tree 2. And for the second tree, again with your marquee tool, pick up and select an area that is the area where I want my tree to go in. Again, I'm going to Filter, Render, Tree, and I'm going to use pretty much the same settings, but I do want to drop my branches down a little bit lower because I have this area by the garage that I need to cover. And I need to pick up my Move tool, and I'm going to adjust the size of my tree and place it over the top of the area where the trunk is supposed to be. This way I know it's going to be covering the front of the garage. And there I have my trees. Now we're good with trees. We need to get some shrubbery put in. We are actually going to build a brush to create our shrubs. So another new layer, and this one we need to pull down below the trees, because if you see the shrubs, you're going to have two shrubs that are going to be behind the trees. Name that Shrubs, and we're going to create a new brush to make our shrubbery. Pick up your brush tool, and in your opacity make it 100%, flow should be 100%, and we want our mode to be normal. Open the brush preset picker and open the panel options. We want to choose the faux finish brushes. You can replace your brushes. I'm going to actually append mine, and either way is perfectly fine. What we are looking for is the stencil sponge twirl. We're going to create a brush based on that setting. Okay, now we have that brush. Go to your options to toggle your brush panel, and that's going to pop up on the right side of your screen. We are going to start by choosing the top, the brush tip shape. We want to make the size of our brush about 40 pixels. We want the angle of our brush to be 30 degrees. And we don't want a perfectly round brush because the shrubs are not round. We're going to change that to 50%. Select Shape Dynamics, which is the next item down in the list. We want our jitter to go to 50%. Jitter changes the size and shape a little bit. So you see in your proxy down here how the jitter is actually making larger and smaller brushes. It randomizes the settings. Change your angle jitter to also around 50%, and your roundness can also come up. Set controls to off if it is not turned off already. The next item in our list is the scattering. Photoshop can scatter the marks along both axes. So we are going to turn on both axes and select to bring scatter up to about 150%. Do you see how it randomizes our brush? We are going to set our count to 2. That limits the number of brush marks that can be placed in the same area. Move down to color dynamics, and we're going to have a foreground background jitter of 100%. That means the color is going to vary between our foreground and background with shades in between. Move down to transfer and apply a 15% opacity jitter. Now go to your tools panel, and let's set the background color first. And we're going to set our swatch, our background swatch, to foliage 2 and our foreground swatch to foliage 1. And now, making sure that you're on your shrubs layer, and let's zoom in a little bit so we can see what we're actually doing. We can start creating our shrubbery. See how we get random shapes, and the more you brush over an area, the more density you're going to get, because we selected to build up, so we can get a lovely brush going. But it's going to take some doing to build this up. You are going to have to keep brushing over the same area to get a very dense color, but you will be building that up. You can do it across multiple bushes at the same time, which will speed up a little bit of what you're doing. This is going to take you a little while to get these shrubs built up. If you have too much trouble with opacity, go in and double check your hue, saturation, and brightness jitter and make sure that's coming up good. And just experiment with some of the settings. I'm going back in to place more over where I was too opaque, or where I was too transparent. And if you want to, you can always try changing your foreground and background color, and perhaps try one of the other colors and see if it works better for you. Once you're happy with your shrubbery, go ahead and turn on all of your layers so that you can see how everything is looking. We've got a pretty decent looking place now. The only thing we're missing yet is some grass. And if you find any areas that you really didn't get the items painted all the way down to the ground, cover them up with shrubbery. That's what shrubs are for. This piece right here is a little awkward next to the door. Just cover it with shrubs. I'm not going to worry about having you save the brush preset. We did that for basically the same thing with saving the pattern. If you want to do that, go ahead. It really doesn't bother me if you don't. But we are going to go on to put down and finish the painting. We're going to put in some sod. We're going to add a new layer right above the sketch layer and call it sod. You could put this up right behind or above your shrubbery layer, but I didn't find that worked very well. So I kind of like the idea of putting in the sod layer, and I would actually vary what the book tells you to do, and I would pick up just a small soft round brush and give it a nice color. And the reason I want to do this is because I would like to go in and put a little bit of a background in, because then I don't have to do quite so much. And I do want a soft brush, but I don't want to be able to have to put in as much of the grass. I found it very tedious to do that. Pick up from my brushes way down at the bottom, I believe it was veining feather. You can use veining feather 1 or 2. Brush tip shape is fine. The shape dynamics, you can add some size jitter to it, change your angle on your jitter. In scattering, we want to be able to have some scattering going on. Bring your count up, vary your count jitter a little bit. We can go to color dynamics. Again, we want to foreground background jitter. You can change the hue, saturation, and brightness. And then again, I'm going to zoom in. As I'm painting with this, I can go in and say, okay, I'm going to vary my hue a little bit more. Let's vary the saturation a bit more. I can go back to my scattering and I can change my count. I can go in and I can change my angle a little bit more so I get a little more randomness. I can also go back in and pick up a different color swatch. Maybe this time I want foliage 6 for my foreground color, or maybe foliage 7. Oh, I need my lasso tool. And I'm going to go into my house shadows. I can see this little bit of brown there, and I'm going to pick up my eraser and get rid of that. That was just a touch of cleaning up. And the last thing now that I want to do is right above my sketch layer again, I'm going to add a new layer, and I can fill this with solid white. I can also make a different choice, and I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to select a very light blue. Find a nice pretty blue. There we go. And I'm going to pick up, I'm on that new layer, and I am going to pick up my gradient tool, and I am going to put in a slight gradient so I get a blue sky now and white, or you can do a solid white background. I kind of like the blue. And you're done. You need to flatten this image, turn it into a JPEG, and submit the JPEG to me.